Hello and welcome to my channel, Rhino here. Today, we're continuing to discuss absolute morality with the Executive Director of Answers in Genesis Canada, who so far has failed to even demonstrate the existence of moral absolutes, and even if I grant the one he did discuss, then it turns out that there are a very limited number of moral absolutes, and they're ones that God commands people to violate in the Bible, so they can't be absolutes from a Christian perspective unless they first concede that God does not always behave morally. Let's see what comes next.
If it's true, then there are absolutes. It's absolutely true that no one should ever hurt someone else.
No, absolutely not. To reiterate, he was talking about people having the right to believe whatever they want to, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone. Believing that as a principle does not automatically mean that it is absolutely wrong to ever hurt anyone. I would argue that self-defense is a situation in which you can morally justify hurting someone. Protection too. If you come across someone getting mugged and you are able to help but need to hurt the mugger in order to do it, then hurting the mugger is morally justified. But you, with your absolute morals, cannot justify causing harm in these situations if your position is that hurting others is absolutely immoral, because in order to be absolute, it has to be true regardless of the situation.
Which means this statement actually argues against a belief in no absolutes.
Incorrect.
Now, when someone says something that, if true, means it's false, it's called a self-refuting argument. It can't possibly be true.
Yeah, but in this case, it's not a self-refuting statement because you had to use equivocation and strawmanning in order to get there. If you need to use multiple logical fallacies to get to a position of having refuted the argument against your position, then the argument against your position has not been refuted.
And this type of argument literally self-destructs. We've all heard these types of statements. I mean, think of a couple of them here. How about, well, you can't know anything for sure.
Nope, not true. Any knowledge that is based entirely on definitions can be known for sure. I know for sure that no married bachelors exist, as long as we first agree that bachelor here is being defined as an unmarried man, seeing as how an alternative definition is someone who holds a bachelor's degree, so they obviously can get married. Also, everyone can be certain of their own existence. Maybe not their experiences, but their existence is a sure thing. You can't be certain of other people's existence, not 100%, but your own is in the bag. And really, this whole thing is you trying to use intellectual honesty against your opponent. You are willing to ignore the fact that our brains are known to create vivid experiences that never happened under the right circumstances, in order to claim that you know for certain that God exists. An intellectually honest person will admit that because we know our brains can be tricked into experiencing reality in a way that does not actually comport with reality, it is impossible to know for certain that we aren't just a brain in the vat. But you'll find almost nobody actually believes in hard solipsism, just that intellectually honest people will admit that it is a possibility, though there is no evidence supporting it as a conclusion.
Well, how do you know that for sure?
Because we can be certain of what is happening in our own minds. That's really about the only thing that we can have 100% certainty in. I know I exist because I know that I'm having experiences. I know that a married bachelor does not exist because I know the definition that I understand for the word bachelor.
Talking about God is meaningless. Then your statement itself is meaningless.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that talking about God is meaningless. I've heard it said that it is pointless, sure, but even then it's usually about trying to convince people to stop believing in God being a pointless endeavor, not that just any general conversation that has the word God in it is a pointless conversation. And also, I would point out that that's actually a comment I get semi-regularly on my channel. Why bother? You're not going to change anyone's minds. This whole thing is pointless. Well, YouTube atheists played a not insignificant role in my deconversion, and I have had several messages from people who have told me that I played at least a partial role in their deconversion, so no, it is not pointless. I do what I do for past me.
Well, there's no such thing as truth.
Well, I am sure that there are people out there who would agree that there is no such thing as truth. I am not one of those people. I would define truth as a statement that comports with reality, and we can measure reality by making predictions about how it will behave.
Is that a true statement?
In my opinion, no.
There are no absolutes. Are you absolutely sure that there are no absolutes?
There's that equivocation again. You're relying on two different definitions of absolute in order to make that point. The philosophical noun absolute is a value or principle which is regarded as universally valid, or which may be viewed without relation to other things. But the adjective absolutely in the absolutely sure part of that statement is using the not qualified or diminished in any way or total definition of absolute. You can have an undiminished certainty that no values or principles exist which could be regarded as universally valid, without it being self-contradictory. Would you be correct? I think so, but it is not a self-defeating statement.
Well, no one can know, for sure any truth about religion. Then how do you know that truth about religion?
Again, that isn't something that I have ever heard anyone say. Now, I have heard people say that nobody can know for sure whether or not God exists, which by extension implies that nobody can know for sure whether or not a religion in general is true, but you have to bastardize that in order to turn it into a self-defeating statement.
You see the point here? Science is the only sure method of finding truth.
No, it is not. No scientist worth their salt will tell you that science is a sure thing. It's just the best that we have so far, and it's certainly better than your word games.
Well, what specific scientific experiment taught you that truth?
Why does it need to be a single specific scientific experiment? Could it not just be the demonstrable and measurable results that the scientific method has had over the years? You're trying to constrain it to something that would be impossible in order to claim that it is impossible when in reality no such constraint exists.
You can even people are saying things like, well, you can only know truth through experience, but what experience would have taught you that?
Okay, I'm gonna need you to start providing citations for these statements. I have literally never heard anyone say that, ever. I mean, again, I suppose you could bastardize the whole truth is that which comports with reality as adjudicated by predictive power into that, seeing as how the testing of a prediction would qualify as an experience, but are you seriously trying to suggest that we can know the truth through a method other than experience? How can you learn something without an experience? I got the knowledge from God. Okay, so you experienced God giving you that knowledge. I feel like you're trying to equivocate again, like you want us to think that you meant something like these people don't believe that they can know that a stove is hot unless they touch it themselves, when in reality you can have the experience of someone else warning you that the stove is hot. That is still an experience, even if you never directly experienced the hot stove for yourself. Sure, you could choose not to believe them and then go mash your hand on the stove, but that doesn't make your conversation with them any less of an experience.
Some people like to avoid the concept of absolutes because they believe it leads to intolerance and makes people judgmental.
Don't do it. I see it coming, but please, no. Don't say that we're intolerant of your intolerance. That is such a stupid line. Be better.
For example, many people times people will be offended when a Christian states their views on certain subjects based on what the Bible teaches. Someone might take offense if a Christian disagrees with same-sex marriage, for example.
Yeah, you see, this isn't a problem with you just believing that same-sex marriage is wrong. This is a problem with you lobbying the government to make same-sex marriage illegal. When a gay or lesbian couple get married, it does not do you any harm, but you actively denigrate them. Using my objective measuring stick of harm versus benefit, allowing LGBTQ people to get married does not actually harm anyone and benefits the LGBTQ people, and in more ways than just their personal emotional fulfillment, which should be enough on its own. But there's also things like estate laws, taxes, and hospital visitation privileges, which all favor married couples over unmarried ones. Were you to be successful in outlawing their marriages, that would do a lot of harm and no good. So it is objectively wrong to ban same-sex marriage because it creates harm where there need be none.
God doesn't agree with it, the Christian might say.
Well, then God's an asshole for making people LGBTQ and then insisting that they not be what he made them.
Well, a typical response might be something like, well, that's the problem with Christians. They're always judging other people's morals and values.
No, you see, the problem is not your personal judgmental feelings on the matter. That just makes you an asshole. The problem is your actions that result from these personal judgmental feelings.
Well, when they did that, they also judged the Christians' morals and values.
Yeah, well, the atheists are not the ones with the book that literally says, "Judge not, lest ye be judged." And that might not have been the exact phrasing, but that's exactly the argument. They're just intolerant of our intolerance.
Some people might want to say, well, it's okay to judge as long as you don't try to force your morality and opinions on other people.
That depends on what opinions we're talking about. If your opinions are objectively shit, then yeah, don't force those opinions on others, especially not when allowing those others to just exist as they are doesn't actually do anything to hurt you.
Well, it's easy to point out that if that's their morality and opinion, why are they trying to force it on other people?
We're not. You're allowed to have your shitty moral opinions. We just don't want you to be able to legislate your shitty moral opinions. There is a significant difference there. A murderer is allowed to have the opinion that murdering is not immoral, but as soon as they follow through and commit murder, they have now performed an action that has an effect on another person's life, and so should be held accountable. Same principle here. You can be as much of a bigot as you want, but if your actions start affecting other people, then just remember that actions have consequences.
See, there's virtually no way to be a consistent moral relativist.
Who said anything about relative morality? I've been making a case for objective morality this whole time. I'm sure a case could be made for moral relativism, but the position that has the hardest time being consistent is the one that advocates for moral absolutes, because you can't find a single instance of a moral absolute that isn't violated either by your God or by your God's command in the Bible. How can a moral be absolute if it is moral to violate it on occasion? And really, absolute morality would be easier to argue as an atheist. I could say genocide is absolutely wrong in all circumstances at all times. You cannot, because you have a book in which the guy who is supposed to be the source of your morality both commands and commits genocide on multiple occasions. We don't have a book that violates every potential principle that could be posited as a moral absolute. You do.
I've seen people argue that there's no clear-cut right and wrong passionately 1 minute, and then talk about how unfair it was that the person at work got a raise and they didn't the next minute. Well, how do they suddenly know that that's wrong?
But now, is that a clear-cut right and wrong situation? Are you saying it is obviously wrong that they did not get a raise? Now, I don't know their situation. Did they deserve a raise? Did the person who actually get the raise not deserve it? Was there favoritism going on, or nepotism? Were there any conflicts of interest? Was there something performance-based that can be objectively measured? It is possible for me to not believe in absolute right and wrong, and still think it unfair for someone else to have gotten a raise before me, even if I didn't deserve it.
You see, someone saying that there's no God and no rules shouldn't say that anyone else's opinions are wrong, including Christians whose opinions they don't agree with.
I can actually agree with that statement. Someone who says there are no rules cannot reasonably expect people to follow the rules. Now find me such a person, and we can both agree that they are wrong together. Oh look, what's that over there? I found one! Oh wait, on closer inspection it just seems to be clothes stuffed with straw.
So, are there moral absolutes? Yes.
You just failed to demonstrate any. At least any that would be supported by your book claimed to have been written by the guy that you are claiming as the source of these absolutes. That's it for this one. Today's comment of the day comes to us from Jim Copeland, who says, I don't know why creationists are so afraid of defining the term kind, but I'm pretty sure that they are typically referring to the taxonomic classification of family. Yes, Jim, they generally do use family as a kind of divider, but they usually don't come out and say it, for two reasons. First, that would make humans the same kind as the rest of the great apes, and they can't have that. May as well just admit to macroevolution at that point. And second, it allows them to jump around as needed to allow two very superficially similar species that are not in the same family to still be the same kind, while denying two very superficially different species that are in the same family the same kind label. Thanks for watching. Special thanks as always to my patrons, Lynn Dobbs, Mark McManus, What Jesus, and all the rest, who are the absolutes to the truth that is my channel. If you'd like to not be absolutely certain of your existence, you can join us on Patreon for as little as $1 per week over at patreon.com/ViceRhino. If you feel so inclined, you can support the channel through direct donation or my Amazon wishlist, which are linked in the description, as well as my social media accounts, my P.O. Box address, and a link to my podcast, which is just basically this, but smushed into one video instead of two, and it's not a video, it's audio because, podcast. See you next time!